And now you guys have graduated from college. You know, you're on your own. Ryan, you're married. Josh, you just graduated.
I'm not married.
You're not married. He's single.
Single.
Would you like to give out your Facebook?
I'll pray
thing?
about it.
Okay, pray about that. Okay, anyway, what I want to talk about, guys, is this firsthand faith, and I got some excerpts from some of the things that you guys have written in your book, and it moves me. But I just want to read this to you. And by the way, these guys wrote it. The way they wrote it was really cool. They both have experienced a lot of the same things, though they're very different. And they wrote this thing where you don't know which one's talking at any different time, and it's 50%, 50%, but they melded it together so that, it wouldn't be, hey, Ryan's talking now, hey, Josh is talking now. So
it makes the plot twist at the end that much more.
It really does. It really does. Though I know every one of these stories, than who it is. But it says this: after years of going to church, following the rules, and trying to replicate the faith of our parents, we had to admit that something was fading fast in our souls. But there's good news. Right in the middle of our personal crisis of faith, we made a discovery that changed everything. What we discovered was that what we thought was our faith wasn't ours at all. It belonged to our parents. Sure, some of it was real for us too, but a lot of it wasn't. And then you go on to say that it doesn't matter how real your parents' faith is if you don't develop a faith of your own. A secondhand faith that's never owned for yourself doesn't anchor your life. At the very least, when pressures and problems hit, what you thought you believed will crumble. That kind of faith is more like a shirt you wear when you're with a certain group of friends. In reality, that kind of faith is not faith at all. It's secondhand religion. And it doesn't get inside your life or change anything about you. Firsthand faith is not something you wear on the outside. Firsthand faith, in our experience, is centered deep in your own mind and heart. Sure, it's still a work in progress, but it's yours. It's you. And when hard times hit, you have a lot to draw on to weather the storm. In fact, firsthand faith is so real and personal, it just gets stronger when the heat is on. That's why we wrote this book, to help you dump secondhand religion and make your faith your faith. Why don't you tell us, Josh, why don't you start and tell us how you got to that point where you realized, man, I need something deeper, something more from the Lord in my relationship with Him. I can't just rely on mom and dad's faith.
I think for us, growing up in the church, which I'm so thankful for, first of all, it was awesome. It was an awesome experience to watch, the church grow and to watch, mom and dad grow and our whole family. Yeah. That's just, how we grew up at the church was, started around the same time we were born, and I think that for me and Ryan, it wasn't so much that we did a lot of bad things or, really struggled with, a lot of serious stuff, or what I guess would be considered serious stuff. But as we grew up, we just did all the right things. We went to church. We went to church camp. We helped out in the student ministry. We went to Bible study. We did our quiet times. And it just always seemed a little bit hollow. And I think that, in Scripture, the Christian life is described as life in all its fullness. And for us, it wasn't so much that it wasn't, bad or something had failed us, but it just was not life in all its fullness. It was just not, we felt like we were doing something wrong. Maybe it's just because I messed up in this. I'm not doing this right. And I think that because we never really had that, we were never really forced to make that decision to get awkward with God, to have those awkward moments where you say, yeah, this is really what I'm struggling with. This is me being real. Because of that, we just never really, had a faith that was our own. We never really, it was always surface level, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so when I went to college, and I think with Ryan, it was when he went to college too, we kind of realized, oh, wow, not that, I can get away with a lot more, but it was also, man, if I, is this really how I want to live my life? And for me, it became something where I had to continually go to the Lord and rely on Him for some sense of, stability, which is something I never had to do before. And I think that another thing is that me and Ryan have come to the realization, I think in doing that and getting out into the real world, we're so broken and imperfect. Ryan can attest to that for me, and Calvin and Joe, who are playing up with me here, who live with me, they can definitely attest to that as well. And I just feel so broken and imperfect. And I used to think that that was what kept me from the Lord, and that's what kept my relationship at surface level. And I wasn't trying hard enough, and I wasn't doing things enough. But I kind of realized that it was because I didn't have those awkward moments with God, because I kept it surface level and forgetting the fact that God meets me in my brokenness, and that the whole point is I'm made clean so God can have a relationship with me. God doesn't, have a relationship with me because I'm clean. He did that already. And so remembering that and realizing that he has a plan for me, and he has he just wants to get to know me, is something that kind of blew me away. And so in those hard times, those times when we're messing up all the time, and that desperation, or the times when we feel like God's not there, I feel like that's so biblical and that's so beautiful, because those are the times that we're forced to rely on God more. If it was just a one quick fix, then I wouldn't have to have a relationship with him. If he just fixed me like a doctor and sent me on my way, then I wouldn't get to know him at all, and I wouldn't care, and it would just be an aspect of my life instead of its core feature.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's like you were saying with the story of at the Dream Center with that guy that kept coming back and kept coming back. So often the truth is that our faith really is a process, and that was just an element that Josh and I, love to talk about and love to think about, is how faith is not just a one-time event. It's a lifetime of ups and downs and all kinds of adventures and struggles.
It's awesome, and I think it's just so easy for all of us, because when you guys started talking to Mom and I about this, we're going, oh, we can relate totally, And I think it's just so easy for us to take our faith and we start turning it into this checklist of do these great things, and they're great things the Bible tells us to do, but if we just turn it into that checklist, then it stops being the relationship. And you guys wrote this, that the most important thing to know about a more personal faith is just how personal God is. We like to put it this way: a first-hand faith starts with realizing what is written on God's hand. For example, look at what God says in Isaiah 49:15, which is the verse that's going up on the screen there. I will not forget you. I've engraved you on the palm of my hands. And just think about that for a moment. The God who created the galaxies and the infinite universe has written your name on the palm of his hands. God knows your name. He knows every detail of your life. He knows the deepest longings of your heart. He knows your darkest secrets, your greatest fears, your unspoken dreams. And oh yeah, he's crazy about you. He cares so deeply about every personal detail of your life that your name is engraved on his hand. And it's that personal relationship, isn't it, Ryan?
Totally, yeah. For us, it's all about the relationship aspect of our faith. Mm-hmm. The subtitle of our book is Dumping Secondhand Religion for a Firsthand God who really loves you and cares about you. And so Josh and I just have always known that, growing up, like Josh was saying, this faith we had was always someone else's. We knew the right rules, we knew the right checklist of things, but we really, now looking back, we know that radical transformation really only occurs when what you believe and the things you stake your life on are what you believe in your heart, and not what your friends tell you or your parents tell you or anyone else. Yeah. And that's just such a crucial thing for us. And so it comes down to your relationship with you and God, and that flows into all the relationships around you. Yeah. But if you don't start there, it's hard to really do anything.
Great point. And I think that that's something I think just about every person your age or maybe a few years ago for sure goes through. And that's why you have so many kids who grow up in church and then boom, they go to college, they go off the deep end, and they never go back. And it's not the church's fault, it's not the youth pastor's fault, it's not anything like that, but it's just that everybody has to really develop a faith of their own. When you receive Christ, he'll never leave you, but then you got to allow him to develop that faith. And for you guys, when you guys went off on your own in college, it was like, man, you just had to have God to rely on, and totally. Especially Josh going off, and not knowing anybody at the university you went to. And I want to get back to one thing Josh said, though, because there's a second thing. You ought to write this in your notes. Embrace your emptiness and then turn to the real source for filling. That's a key to change. It says here, when I went to college, it really hit me that I was alone, without friends, without family, and without anyone else to take responsibility for my faith. And by the way, this is Josh. I know that. It was just God and me. After realizing that no one could force me into a relationship with God, the emptiness of that relationship became impossible to ignore. The frustration turned to desperation. I finally started to realize that the emptiness is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a divine gift. It was the pain of my emptiness that finally drove me to become desperate enough to fall into the arms of the only one who could fill my deepest cravings. As I look back, I see that all along it was God himself that gave me the gift of emptiness. God loves us so much and so desires a deep and real relationship with us that it created us to feel the pain of emptiness until we give up and fall into his ocean of fullness. That's pretty cool that, that emptiness is really the thing I know in my life, looking back, that drew me, whenever, and it still draws me constantly to go back to God. Because anytime I do anything that moves away from him, I'm empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Josh and I just got back from high school camp, and like you're talking about, all the baptisms that went on and the life change, and it's just so cool because we saw all these high schoolers that were just like us. We look back and, we could just see, in them everything we were in high school. Their faith wasn't really their own. They kind of knew, they'd been in the church for a while, but it wasn't really anything that was real to them in a heart sense. And then to watch these kids over just a week take the gospel and just absorb all this stuff, and then to see all these baptisms, you realize how all this really does apply,
Yeah, it really does, but it doesn't matter if you don't apply it in your own life.
Totally.
It's a personal thing,
Totally.
And I've learned so much from you guys.
Yeah, and it also reminded me just how, sure, these are high school students, but regardless of your age, that feeling of emptiness is always there, or it's something that you run across really often. And Josh said some really good stuff about that. Yeah. And I know in your own life, probably the low point for you for emptiness was when you're in high school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, high school was, especially earlier on in high school, depression was something I really struggled with, and I didn't really share that with anyone. And I think that opening up with that to mom and dad in the whole situation, the way everything unfolded really kind of made me at the time bitter at my parents, bitter at the church. I felt let down by a lot of people. And I think I talk about it more in the book. But all that to say,
so you have to buy it.
So you have to, yeah, that's right. No, you won't. Yeah, you don't know how messed up I am.
The memoirs of
that's
Josh
right.
Shook.
That would not be interesting. But anyway, but because of that, I think that I was so reluctant, and I hated these awkward conversations I started having with my parents when they, because one of the things I struggled with was self-mutilation and cutting, and I just hated having these conversations with them and talking to them about it. I felt like they didn't understand it. I'm not trying to say that, to draw attention to what I struggled with. I just hated these awkward moments. And what I realized is those awkward moments have made my relationship with mom and dad better, stronger than ever. And I'm so thankful for it. And I realize so often that I choose not to have those awkward moments with God. And I see that carry over in my personal relationships and my relationship with the Lord, this unwillingness to get past the surface level. Just when someone asks you, how's your day going, and you just say, good, and you don't think about it. Or I feel like I do that with God all the time, I don't, it's just, I go to church, I do this or that, and yeah, but things aren't going on, but I don't have that dialogue with God about it, and I feel like that's all he really wants.
And it does seem like surface transformation is like the easy thing to do.
Yeah, and it doesn't last.
Right.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when you started opening up to us about the struggles you were going through. And I remember just being blown away by your courage and your guts. And then Ryan opening up about the struggles he was going through. And then, you guys taught me so much about being completely real with God. And the emptiness that you guys talked about, I told you about emptiness in my life and how God has brought me to emptiness in so many ways. But I just want to commend you guys because I feel like your kids raise you in a lot of ways. And these guys just amaze me in their spirituality and honesty. And that emptiness is a divine gift. I mean, it's taken me 50 years to just barely get to that point to say, you know what, when I feel empty, that's a really good thing because it brings me to God. Otherwise, I wouldn't ever have a relationship with God. And these guys got to it so early. I think Josh Shook said emptiness is a divine gift. So stop anesthetizing and covering it up and embrace the emptiness you feel. Emptiness will lead you to become desperate for a real faith. It's that desperation that will drive you into a genuine relationship with the only one who can quench your deepest thirst. Everyone experiences emptiness, but not everyone becomes desperate for real fulfillment. Desperation is what you feel when you're in so much pain or fear, you'll try almost anything. You know the feeling. Desperation sucks. It's a pretty strange dynamic when you think about it. First you feel empty, then you get miserable, then you get desperate, then you change. In Jesus' most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, he has something to say to all of us who are desperate, and it's good news. He says, and this is the next verse in your notes, you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God and his rule. What do you think that means when Jesus said blessed, which means happy, but what do you think that means that how blessed are you when you're at the end of your rope? That sounds horrible to me.
Well, I think honestly that's the most beautiful part about it, because I don't think unless we embrace that emptiness and that desperation, we can't. I mean, as a church, we kind of fail. I think that, we have to. When you embrace your emptiness, you embrace the fact that you're imperfect, you're broken, you don't have it all together, you don't have the answers, and in doing that, you start living in grace and you start living in mercy. You start realizing everything, every good thing in your life is just a gift from the Lord. And if you don't do that, you start to think, well, I deserve this, or you feel entitled, or you feel better than someone else, like this isn't worth my time to help this person. And I think that once we embrace that emptiness, I feel like, Christ calls us blessed because we can't help but love others in the way that Christ first loved us. And so,
that kind of reminds me how it was really awkward for Josh and I to open up to you, right? But you were there for us when we were ready to talk to you. And so on Father's Day, it really reminds me how crucial it is for in our own walk to have parents who, sure, we might have all the time said, you guys don't get it or whatever, you guys aren't like us. But having parents who were patient enough to wait and to be willing to deal with that awkward stuff. Because Josh and I know so many parents who back down if they're, if their kids if things get messy, the parents back down. And it also reminds me how the same way you and Mom stuck with it and were ready to face us head on when we were ready to talk about things that were awkward and messy and uncomfortable. It's such an awesome reminder to remember that God's always there, to remember the exact same thing is he's always waiting for us. Because a lot of times we think God doesn't want to see this, we should hide this from God. It's not his problem, it's not his issue. But it's just such a powerful reminder that God really is just waiting to deal with those messy issues. He just wants you to come to him. Yeah.
I'm just so proud of you guys, and I just keep learning from you. And I can't wait to, I just love reading what God's writing through you in such a powerful way. And Josh is going to lead us in a worship song, and you can tell everybody about it, Josh, when you get set up and come back. And we're going to sing it as our benediction. It's going to be our end of the message, time of commitment. And when you sing it to him, I want you to sing it to the Lord, because it's not about anything other than your relationship with Jesus Christ. And he loves you so much, and he cares about you so much. And Ryan, you wrote this about Jesus saying, you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God and his rule. It says, even though Jesus' words sound completely backwards, he knew something that very few of us ever stop to think about. I can't be filled with God until I'm emptied of myself. It's so simple and yet so profound. That if I'm full of anything else, if I'm full of me or pride or just trying to get my act together or whatever it may be, I can't be full of him. But when I feel the emptiness, then I have a chance to be filled, because then I can turn to him. Tell me about what you were thinking when you wrote that.
Well, just like you're saying, just a reminder that it reminds me of the kids that came to high school camp, how they came to camp filled with something, whether it was their own selfish ambition or, sex or drugs or, girlfriend or boyfriend, and then watching them over this week, just emptying themselves and realizing that they had to empty everything they were holding on to really be filled up again. It was just powerful, and that's the truth, is we're always holding on to something, but we have to let go of it in order to be filled up again, because as long as you're holding on to whatever that is, and we all kind of know what it is in the back of our hearts and our minds, but we don't really want to admit it. But when we finally do admit that and we let go of those things, it leaves the space that God can finally work in.
That's powerful, Ryan. Yeah. And I think that every one of us are desperate. It's just that, will you admit it or not? And then will you turn to the one who can fill you or not? I mean, that's just the bottom line, because it's a moment-by-moment thing. Salvation happens once when you receive Christ, But then moment by moment, I have to depend on him because I can't make it without him. But the great news is he loves you so much, and he's there to rescue you. Let's stand together, and Josh and his team are going to lead us. And just sing it to the Lord because he's the only one that can rescue you. I don't know what you're going through, hurt, pain, destructive habits and sins. I don't know, but we're all a mess, and we need his restoration process in our lives. We need his rescue.